All right, let's dive right into this explainer and uncover a civilization that has completely captivated humanity for millennia. For the longest time, those grand pyramids just towered over the desert, keeping their secrets tightly locked away. Everything about this ancient society was a profound mystery to us. That is, until July 1799, a French soldier on an expedition unearths a large, incredibly unique rock near Alexandria, the Rosetta Stone. That single discovery was the ultimate key. It unlocked a dead written language and revealed the majestic, cyclical history of ancient Egypt. So today, we're going to break down exactly how this incredible empire operated. We are going to navigate over 3,000 years of history across 5 distinct eras: the gift of the Nile, the age of the pyramids, the Middle Kingdom Renaissance, the Golden Empire, and finally, its twilight and eternal legacy. Section 1. The gift of the Nile, the true foundation of a civilization. So the true main character of our story isn't actually a pharaoh or some conquering general. It is the mighty river that made absolutely everything possible. The Greek historian Herodotus really had the nail on the head when he wrote, "Egypt is the gift of the Nile." Its annual summer flooding was literally the lifeblood of the entire region. As those floodwaters receded, they left behind this incredibly rich, fertile mud along the banks. And that geographical jackpot right there, that's what transformed early nomadic hunter-gatherers into one of the very first agricultural societies in human history. Without that mud, there was simply no empire. But before it was a unified empire, the land was split in two. You had Upper Egypt down in the south, represented by the white Hedjit crown, and Lower Egypt up in the northern delta, represented by the red Deshret crown. Then, right around 3000 BC, King Narmer sweeps through, unifies these two lands, and literally merges the headwear to create the iconic double crown of the Pharaohs. And just like that, Egypt's first dynasty is born. Section 2. Age of the Pyramids, the Old Kingdom. Now, the ancient world's most iconic monuments weren't just overnight magic. It wasn't aliens, right? It was a logical step-by-step architectural evolution. They actually started with these simple, flat-topped mud brick tombs called mastabas. Then, an absolute architectural genius named Imhotep decided to stack those mastabas on top of each other, creating King Djoser's massive 62-meter step pyramid. Later on, King Sneferu spent his reign perfecting that smooth-sided design through pure trial and error with his bent and red pyramids. All of this paved the exact runway for the grand finale we all know today, the Great Pyramids of Giza. But the Giza builders actually tell a really fascinating story of peak prosperity that's immediately followed by a sudden decline. And spoiler alert, contrary to the popular myths out there, these pyramids were not built using slave labor. Khufu built the Great Pyramid using a highly efficient, paid citizen workforce. We're talking about farmers who needed a job during the flooding season when their fields were underwater. Khafre then followed up with the second pyramid and, of course, the magnificent Great Sphinx. But then look at Menkaure. His monument is drastically smaller. By the time he's in charge, the immense resources of the state were just drying up. It was the twilight of the Old Kingdom's absolute power. You see, Egyptian history operates exactly like the Nile's floods. It ebbs and flows. The centralized power of the Old Kingdom eventually collapsed entirely. Local governors, called nomarchs, started grabbing power for themselves, and a severe drought pushed the whole nation into chaos. We call this the First Intermediate Period. But just like those returning floodwaters, the nation would ultimately bounce back, reunited by a new set of leaders from Thebes. Section 3. The Middle Kingdom Renaissance: Art, Stability, and Irrigation. Following that dark period of chaos we just talked about, King Mentuhotep II forcefully reunites the lands and, boom, sparks a massive cultural and regional rebirth. During the 12th dynasty, the Middle Kingdom was thriving on some seriously incredible infrastructure and stability. They were problem-solving at an incredibly high level. They invented nilometers to actually measure the height of the river's floods so they could calculate taxes accurately. They used a brilliant little lever and bucket tool called the shadoof to lift irrigation water. They engineered complex dikes to turn the Fayum area into a huge agricultural hub. And politically, they started using co-regency. That meant having the reigning king rule right alongside his chosen heir to guarantee a perfectly smooth transfer of power. No succession crises here. But as you can probably guess, the cycle repeats. The 13th dynasty starts off well enough, but eventually the rulers at the center take their eyes off the ball. They neglect their northern and southern borders. This weakness fractures the nation again and opens the door for a terrifying foreign invasion, plunging Egypt straight into the Second Intermediate Period. These invaders were known as the Hyksos, which translates to rulers of foreign lands. They were Semitic peoples who initially just settled in the north, gained a ton of economic influence, and eventually just seized political control. But here's the thing. Their invasion forever changed Egypt's DNA. They brought in advanced bronze weaponry and the horse-drawn war chariot. So to eventually drive them out, Egypt was forced to adapt. They adopted these exact same technologies, fundamentally shifting from a quiet, isolated nation into a fiercely militarized empire, really out of pure self-defense. Section 4. The Golden Empire, the New Kingdom's absolute greatest hits. Around 1550 BCE, Pharaoh Ahmose I violently drives out the Hyksos, officially kicking off the New Kingdom. And wow, this is an era of unprecedented wealth, fiercely aggressive warrior pharaohs, and massive monumental temple building. You've got Hatshepsut, a brilliant female pharaoh who launched incredibly lucrative trade expeditions to the land of Punt. Then Thutmose III, the ultimate empire builder, pulling off brilliant tactical maneuvers, like using a totally unexpected narrow mountain pass to win the Battle of Megiddo. Then comes Amenhotep III, ruling over an absolute golden age of unimaginable wealth. Then it gets wild with Akhenaten, who controversially outlaws all the ancient gods to worship just a single sun disk, Aten. And of course, his son, the famous boy king Tutankhamun, who steps in to quickly reverse his dad's radical policies and restore the old gods. It is just non-stop historical drama. Now, just wrap your head around this number for a second. 67. That is the staggering number of years that Ramesses II, arguably the most famous pharaoh we know of today, ruled over the Egyptian empire. Ramesses II's reign was defined by almost unbelievable scale. He led an astonishing 20,000 soldiers, personally charging forward in his chariot against the Hittites at the legendary Battle of Kadesh. But beyond all that military bravado, his greatest achievement might actually be diplomatic. Following that massive conflict, he managed to negotiate and sign the very first documented peace treaty in all of human history. However, jump forward just a few generations, and the empire is staring down a terrifying existential threat. Ramesses III had to defend Egypt from a massive confederation of mysterious, seafaring invaders known only as the Sea Peoples, and he actually saved the nation. He used brutal naval guerrilla tactics, ambushing their ships right from the coastline with volleys of flaming arrows. He won the war, for sure, but the sheer astronomical cost of fighting those battles completely bankrupted the royal treasury. And this financial ruin, it had very real, honestly very modern consequences. Because the money was just gone, the highly skilled artisans and tomb builders over at Deir el-Medina simply stopped getting their paychecks. So what do? They walked right off the job. This is literally the very first recorded labor strike in human history, and it perfectly signaled the agonizing slow-motion collapse of the New Kingdom Empire. Which brings us to Section 5, Twilight and Eternal Legacy. Echoes through time. With the royal coffers completely empty and the priesthood gaining massive political power, the central authority shattered yet again. The era of native pharaonic rule was effectively over. Power fractured during the Third Intermediate Period. Then, the Nubians from the south swept in and conquered Egypt under King Pia. Later, the Persians invaded. And finally, in 332 BCE, Alexander the Great arrives on the scene, ushering in centuries of Greek and eventually Roman rule. But here's the absolutely incredible takeaway. Egypt's culture ultimately conquered its conquerors. The civilization never truly died. Its echoes are still vibrant and alive right now in the 21st century. Today, Egyptians still celebrate spring festivals rooted directly in pharaonic traditions. Their modern diet heavily mirrors those ancient agricultural staples. The Coptic language, which is the final evolution of ancient Egyptian, is literally still spoken in church prayers today. And as those recent grand parades in Cairo prove, transporting royal mummies through the streets, they still deeply revere their ancient kings, all while ongoing excavations continue to pull brand new mysteries out of the sand every single day. So as we wrap up this explainer, we can clearly see that this ancient world wasn't just some disconnected era of dusty stone monuments. It was a blueprint for humanity. It leaves us to wonder just how much of our modern world, our architecture, our administration, even our concept of peace treaties and labor strikes was actually born right there in the mud of the Nile River thousands of years ago. Keep digging, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.